So, Martin, here's your cows.
They are.
Now, you treat these in a different way to most farmers, don't you? You use a thing called mob grazing. What actually is that? Is it mobile grazing?
It's actually grazing them as a mob, like a group. It's imitating nature. You are constantly keeping them together, keeping them moving forwards, not allowing them to eat the new growth behind them, and always keeping the grass nice and long so that it's constantly growing behind you.
Okay, why do that?
Because that's the best way to manage your soil. And regenerative farming is all about improving soil. The longer the grass, the faster it's growing, the more carbon it's getting from photosynthesis, the more carbon it's putting into the soil. A good, well-managed pasture will actually sequester as much carbon as a rainforest per acre.
Wow.
And it's also, by keeping this grass long, it has long roots, and that lets water sink right down low, so even in dry periods, you don't run out of water.
And in terms of how many cattle you can have on the land, does that mean that you have to have fewer? Is it sort of less
Not really.
able? Can you make a profit doing this?
Not really. From the same acreage as land, as long as you've got enough for the cattle to be moving across and only coming back every 60 or 70 days, your grass is growing faster. You're getting more forage. So you can actually carry more cattle than if you're grazing it down and the grass is struggling to regrow from having been nibbled short.
Okay, so that does actually mean you can turn more of a profit.
Definitely. And with a variety of plants in the good pastures, and you've been in some of our fields, that's actually quite medicinal for the cattle. There are some that are good for their gut health, some that are good for their immune systems, and so they end up being healthier. Our cattle here are outdoors the whole time. We very, very rarely have a vet. We've had a vet out once recently because one was shot with an air gun pellet, but we haven't had a vet out for illness in 10 years.
That's amazing. So, I take it then you're kind of evangelical about this. You'd like to see lots of other livestock farmers go down this route.
I would, and I'd like to see arable farmers put a livestock rotation into their rotation once every 4 years. The cattle are the world's perfect fertilizing machine. And
this whole farm is regenerative, isn't it? Because you're doing these principles across all of it. How much of a change have you seen to the land since you've been doing it?
Oh, immense. The pastures are looking much better. There's much more variety of plants in them. We never ran out of water last summer. You could always put your hand down in the grass and feel the soil, and it was always damp.
And that means presumably more birds, more insects, more of everything.
It does. Of course, there's no chemicals here either, which is the other great killer of wildlife. Yes, and we also try and manage our woodland in the same way, and our waterways here as well. It's got to be holistic.
And so, has being part of the farm cluster pragmatically helped you do what you want to do?
Yes, joining the farm cluster back in 2019 is really what started us off on our regenerative journey. We were very keen when we bought the farm to be as friendly to the wildlife as possible, and we joined Kent Wildlife Trust and did a number of things with them in the early years back in 2010 and 11. But the farm cluster got me to meet other farmers who were thinking slightly differently from the traditional set stocking of cattle and just moving them around and just trying to make hay as you could. And that then got us in touch with other people like the Pasture Fed Livestock Association and the Nature Friendly Farming Network. And when you get involved in those organizations, you see how many farmers there are who are really trying to farm regeneratively these days.
And in pragmatic terms then, what do you do differently, or what difference does that make to how you work as a group?
Well, it's joined us together. We started our charity about 8 years ago, and one of its objects was to improve the environment on a landscape scale, and you can only do that when you collect together landowners. So the farm cluster we saw very quickly as a way for us to work together with other local farmers, and that started working. And then on the back of that cluster has grown the Upper Belt Water Project, which is all about holding water back in the upper reaches of the river belt so that it doesn't just rush down to the Medway every time it rains. And that's collected 8 or 10 or 12 farmers together with Southeast Rivers Trust as I say, piggybacking on the back of the farm cluster work, that's also, working for nature, because by wetting the land, we're improving the habitats and doing a lot of other things.
And so being part of the cluster means you're joining all your separate efforts
I was
together.
straight into that, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.